is a fairly sizable £60,000 difference in the purchase price. And you might wonder why that is. Well, that is because of this lease extension. Amortization, bit of a difficult one to say that. Right, everybody, welcome. So we're going to be doing a series now where I break down each of the properties that we've purchased over the years in our property portfolio breakdown. So if you've come halfway through in the series, don't forget to go all the way back to the beginning, watch them all the way through one after the other, and then we'll do a summary at the end. Hopefully you're going to find this really interesting and kind of my journey on our property breakdown, which you'll see in other videos I feed in as a general thing. So here you're going to get the real meaty information. And then that information will be summarized at the end. So when you watch other videos and I say, so our property portfolio is XYZ, then you'll understand where that comes from. So you can watch these videos over and over again, nice little series. And as I say, if you've come in halfway through, don't forget to go back to the beginning and watch them all the way through. Otherwise they won't make sense. Right, welcome back to the series on my property breakdown. So we're on property number 4. So if you've joined halfway through this, please don't forget to go back to the beginning and watch all of the other videos so this makes sense. So property number 4. This was, again, a 2-bed property. It was just around the corner from the previous one, but it's not in a building that we manage. And we bought this in 2019. And the important thing about this is, although there was a gap between 2017 when we purchased the previous one and this particular year, it took nearly a year to get a lease extension on it, which is something that you need on leasehold properties. So the previous owner, I had to stick around whilst we were waiting for a lease extension. So it took nearly 12 months to purchase the property. But I didn't get buyer's fatigue because we were agreeing a fairly good price on it. And the thing with 2019 is at this time where I've got those other 3 properties feeding us income at this moment in time, sorry, 2 properties, because obviously I live in one of them, we're actually beginning to build up a pot of money because we're not spending that, because don't forget that this isn't my main job at this moment in time. Obviously I have left and set up my own business, but that's now paying my mortgage and various bills. So this money here is like surplus investment money, if you like. So we're beginning to get to a point where it's now starting to just about help top up the actual kind of property fund, if you like, our spare money. So 2019, this particular property, we offered £160,000 for it. So 160k, bearing in mind this is a few years after the previous property, and that you know, that was on the market. I mean, that when we purchased that, it's a few years later, and that was at 170, valuation of 185. So you can see this property here, it's not quite as desirable as the last one. Doesn't have an underground car park. It's got its own garage, so you could argue that that's just as desirable. So we'll value that one at 220, slightly less because it doesn't quite have as nice of views. So you can see that the purchase price here, 160 and 220, there is a fairly sizable £60,000 difference in the purchase price. And you might wonder why that is. Well, that is because of this lease extension. So obviously when your property gets down to a certain level of your lease, the freeholder will give you a lease for say 125 years. As it ticks away, the property becomes less and less value. And in fact, and when it's only got 1 year left to go, the very next year you have to hand the keys back. So you don't own anything at all. But you do have a statutory right to extend the lease, but you lose that right for 2 years if you just purchase the property. So I needed the previous owners to start this. So they started it in 2018 and it took a year to get to it. And we negotiated the price and the rest of it. And they even said in the end that they would pay the money, which was about £15,000 to extend the lease. So you can argue I'd built in here that I was going to have to pay £15,000 up front, but they actually said, oh, we'll supply it with a new lease. That was in the particulars. So I actually was fairly canny in getting them to supply the lease rather than me having to do it. So at that moment in time, I'm left with a property that's worth 220k in today's money, and £60,000 worth of equity, and I haven't had to pay the £15,000. When this actually went through, the property was probably worth about 190, I would say. So it wasn't obviously the original 60, that's in today's money. So the actual equity, if you like, on day one was about 30k. But what was really good about that is that there was a tenant already in it, and they were paying probably below market rate at the time, which obviously over time we've tried to kind of tease them up without kind of causing them issues, up to a sort of kind of market rate. But it meant that we didn't have to do any work to it at all. So on the journey, obviously I mentioned that the tenant wasn't really paying enough rent. A market rate at the time was probably about $950. And they were paying something like about 700. So obviously we needed to get that increase up. The first port of call for me was to actually ask the previous owners to ask the tenant, because they've got that nice relationship with them. They've known them for 15 years or something, and they've lived there. They're far more easier to do that. But what I did was I supplied them with the tools, with the tools to have that negotiation, because they weren't capable of having it. It's a very awkward conversation. They didn't really want to put the rent up. They were happy with this. They didn't have a mortgage on it and all that sort of stuff. So their criteria is different. So I said to them, you've got to tell you that look, you're going to struggle to sell it and get your value if this rent is so low. You're going to have to enter into a proper tenancy agreement. The deposit's going to have to be registered, a whole bunch of things. So yeah, basically I gave them the tools to make their negotiation or discussion with their tenant a little bit easier, which I feel like they felt I'd bought into that a little bit. At a later stage, I did put a new kitchen and did some refurbishment works in the property. Big bonus was it was done around when the tenant was living there, so there's no loss of rent. But it was my kind of suggestion to the tenant that we put a new kitchen in, we sort it all out for her, make it nice, and that was on that journey, because at the moment the rent is £1,250. So that journey from 700 to there involved a new kitchen in part of those negotiations. And to be honest, I felt bad. The kitchen was fairly old and a bit worn out, and only fair that I invest some of the money back into this property. That's going to do us good because we're investing money into it, but also going to keep the tenant happy as well. So we'll come back into the video now. And one of the conditions of me buying it was that I had to take their tenant on. Well, why wouldn't I want to do that? They're already in the property. They're paying the rent. They've paid it all this time. They want to stay. I want them to stay. If they move out, it probably would have needed a load of work doing to it. So this is a win-win scenario for me. Win for the tenant and win for the owner. So this is a perfect deal because everybody's happy. They might not have got the best price for it. I might have been lumbered with a property that if the tenant moves out, I've got to do it up. I had to wait a year for it. There are issues, but everybody's happy with it. And I think they're the perfect types of deal where everyone walks off going, I'm happy with what I got. I'm not disgruntled. I'm not kind of I don't feel like anybody's been diddled out of anything. We're just all happy with what we've agreed. So that is property number 4. Don't forget to subscribe. It will give you a little alert and you'll be able to see that we've uploaded a new video. And don't forget to comment below. That actually helps the algorithm and it will then pump the video out to a wider audience and hopefully help more people that will be of interest. So subscribe, like, comment. There are 3 things to do. Thank you for watching the video all the way through.